So now that we've talked about how scoring and judging rubrics work, we're going to talk about how the judging session is going to flow. So as a reminder, this document, as well as all the others, are available on the resource library at this URL, and this URL will be posted in the video description so you have access to it. So when you get to your judging session, so the way that an event runs is typically in the afternoon, you will do your 3 robot rounds where everybody's on the table, they're scoring points, ton of excitement. But in the morning, your team will have a 30-minute judging session with the judges. And so for standardization, this is how the judging session flows. For the first 2 minutes, the team enters the room. So the timer starts really as soon as you start walking in the door. So, the teams are talking, they're getting set up. You have 2 minutes basically to get set up, ready to go. This is when you'll do introductions, you'll meet the judges, all that. So 2 minutes, very, very brief. So if you've got your presentations ready to go, you want to keep that 2 minutes in mind that you don't have a lot of time to get set up. The next thing we flow into is the project section. So there's a 10-minute window here. And during this 10 minutes, the judges are focused very strongly on the innovation project. So you'll notice the team comes in with a presentation. And the goal in your presentation is to help the judges fill out that rubric. And one of the things I always tell people is the easier it is for the judge to fill out that rubric during this 5 minutes, the better you're going to score. If you make it hard for the judges to fill out the rubric, you're not going to score as well. Not because they think you're doing a bad job, but if it is hard for them to know, well, did you do the criteria to meet this next bullet point? It's hard for them to give you that bullet point because they have to have concrete evidence. Another thing I tell people is that if the team doesn't talk about it in the judging session, it didn't happen. So what teams like to do is they like to give the judges handouts and booklets and notebooks and all these things to leave with the judges. The judges will not look at them. The judges might use them to refer back to. They'll say, oh, they said this in their judging session, but I can't quite remember what they said about it. They might use it then, but they're not going to get new information from anything you leave with them. So keep that in mind. So the goal of this presentation should be that the judges are able to mark at least, straight 3s on the innovation project at the end of that 5 minutes. It should be very clear, 3s across the board. That's your goal. If you stumble, that's okay, because you also have another 5-minute Q&A session. So after you do your 5-minute presentation, the judges have 5 minutes to ask you questions. So if you maybe forgot a word when you're talking about something and the judges are like, oh, this is put in between a 2 and a 3, let me ask this question. This is a time they would ask that question. And so really your goal should be get that rubric filled out in those 5 minutes. And so when you're practicing your presentation, be filling out those rubrics. Have multiple people filling out those rubrics, because the better you can nail down that rubric in the first 5 minutes, the easier the next 5 minutes are going to go. The next thing, so after those 10 minutes are up, you're going to flow into what I'll call the robot design period. And so you've got a 5-minute window here to do the robot design explanation. So it's not quite a presentation, so you don't need to necessarily have all of the bells and whistles around it that a presentation for the project might have. When you see teams, a lot of times the innovation project will be kind of like a production. Like there will be like a stage show, they'll have music, they'll do acting, it'll be a skit. There's a lot of ways to do the innovation project presentation, and refer back to the rubric to see how you can score on that. For the robot design explanation, it's not necessarily going to be like that. You can make it like that, absolutely. Refer back to the rubric to see kind of where you can add stuff and take stuff out. But this is going to be just an explanation of how does your robot work, as well as how did you arrive at this design? What process did you follow? Did you follow Scrum, Kanban? Did you implement any testing program? And so this is really where they're saying how much engineering went into this robot. And it's the same idea here. The better you can answer that rubric in those 5 minutes, the better the judges are going to score you, because if it's easier for them to fill out the rubric, it's easier for them to give you the points you earned. But again, if you leave something open to interpretation, you've got the Q&A session. It is not a bad thing on either of these if the judges don't have any questions for you. They're going to try to have questions for you no matter what. But if they just don't have questions, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you were able to fill out that rubric in the 5-minute and 5-minute presentation and explanation, you help the judges do their job. They're going to try to ask you more questions. They're going to try to get more out of you. But if they don't have to, they might not. They may not be able to come up with questions. Something I tell teams too is that in a lot of cases, it's not the very strong or the very weak teams that take the full 30 minutes of the judging session. If a team comes in totally unprepared, they might be through pretty quickly because the judges can't ask them anything, or the judges ask them very quickly and they don't have answers for the judges. Likewise, the very strong teams come in, the judges may not be able to ask them questions because the presentations were just that thorough. They gave them all the information they needed. It's those teams that kind of fall more toward the middle of the spectrum where it's like, well, you did a good job, but maybe the presentation and the explanation didn't convey the information as well. And so what'll happen is the team may have done the work, but it doesn't come across in the presentation, which means the judges eat more of those Q&A times. So, don't let taking the full 30 minutes intimidate you, and don't let not using the whole time intimidate you, right? Depending on how well you convey the information, really that's going to determine how much of the time gets taken up. And then there's this last up to 8 minutes for feedback. So we've got a 2-minute intro to come in, 10 minutes on project, 10 minutes on robot design, 8 minutes final share and feedback. And so in the final share, the teams may share any final thoughts they have. The judges may ask some last-minute questions, and then the judges will provide some verbal feedback. So the team is going to get feedback right then and there. So one of the things I know judges like to ask teams sometimes is if the team has any specific feedback they would like. So if your team is going to the session and they know they're going to struggle with something and they want to know ways to improve on it, at the end of the session, this is a good opportunity to ask judges, hey, can we get some specific feedback on this? And so during that 30-minute session, the judges are going to gain all the information they have. As soon as the team leaves after those 30 minutes, they're going to discuss and complete the rubrics. So at the end of that 30 minutes, they're going to fill out your robot design rubric, your project rubric, and all your feedback. And that is all of the criteria for your robot design and innovation project, 10 of the 13 criteria for your core values, and then none of your robot game. And so in the afternoon, you'll get all of your robot game and the rest of your core values. And one of the great things here is the judges will hand those back in before the next team enters. At the end of the competition, you get your rubrics back. So you'll know exactly how many points you scored in each area. You'll also know what feedback the judges have for you. And if you have any 4s on your rubrics, you'll also get back the explanation for why the judges gave you a 4. This is probably where teams struggle the most. They'll come to a competition never having done this. The more you can practice this with your team before the competition gets there, the better the day will go. Because this is the first hurdle they have to get through during the day. And this intimidates a lot of teams, especially if they've never gone through it before. So the best advice I can give related to this is practice this session with the rubrics. Because doing that will let you know how are you doing in your presentation and explanation, and where can you improve so that the judges don't have to rely as heavily on these Q&A sessions. So that's the judging session. And again, that's a good probably 2/3 of your overall scoring for the day. So keep that in mind as you're going through and preparing for your events.